Alright guys, my name is Goblin, and today I'm going to be giving you a detailed and concise 60 to 70 leveling guide for the Mage class in Classic or Legacy TBC. Today we will cover a number of different topics such as unique and useful leveling tips, optimal leveling build, playstyle for optimal kill time and mana efficiency, which shall both include AoE and single target rotations, stat priority, useful classic WoW trinkets and set bonuses to keep, and lastly we'll talk about the reputation priority. Just before we jump in guys, if you want to see more leveling guides coming soon, please hit the subscribe button because that really does help out. You can also follow me on Twitch and Instagram. So let's begin counting down my top 10 unique and useful leveling tips to speed up and improve your leveling experience from level 60 to 70. First things first guys, mount speed. You can very easily increase your mount speed from the typical 100% that a mount gives you to a total of 114% mount speed with a combination of 3 very simple items which will speed you up considerably in the open world, particularly for when you get that 60% flying mount. The 3 items are firstly the carrot on a stick obtained from the quest Garzilla, which is from Zul'Farrak, the Mithril Spurs, which you can very easily buy on the auction house, and the Riding Skill Glove Enchant. I'd also recommend stacking up a few swiftness potions to get out of interior locations a little faster, like caves and stuff like that. And to make the equipping process much simpler, you can get the add-on called Auto Carrot, which automatically equips everything whenever you mount up, and automatically equips your previous gear when you demount. Clear casting fishing is an advanced AoE technique that you can use with a low rank arcane explosion. You basically spam a low rank arcane explosion, you get the clear casting proc, and then you can consume that on a very high mana intensive ability like Blizzard or full rank arcane blast without any mana cost. You can also use a rank 1 fire blast if you ever need to pull some extra mobs in the distance. It's called ping pulling. We'll talk a little bit more about that later in the playstyle section. Remember to strafe between blizzards. The blizzard slow effect actually lasts 4.5 seconds, so you can spend a couple of seconds at the end of your blizzard strafing away from the enemies to gain a little bit of extra distance before you cast your next blizzard, and it really helps out. You can also use ice block if you want to clump big packs up together, because you can just pop it, then let all the mobs run to you, use an ice nova, blink away, and then start your AoE cycle. Although I would recommend not pulling more than 10 mobs, because there's an AoE cap in TBC where your damage is massively nerfed after you've pulled more than 10 mobs, so I wouldn't recommend doing that. You can use Polymorph and Ice Nova to crowd control enemies while you pick up quest items or complete quest objectives, because a lot of the time you may have killed all the mobs that you need to kill for a quest, but you still have to pick up a quest item, therefore killing that mob will be a waste of time. Put it in a Polymorph, pick up the quest item, and then blink away and run away. You can also use Blink and Ice Block as a slow fall effect. If you just use them like a split second before you hit the ground, you will take no fall damage, so you don't always have to rely on using slow fall. Remember to always keep a low rank Frostbolt keybinded if you want a very quick slow, because the cast time is much less than a higher rank one and also costs considerably less mana for the same slowing effect. I would also recommend setting up stop casting macros on abilities like Ice Nova, Counterspell and Polymorph, because sometimes waiting for the cast to finish can actually be detrimental to the situation that you're in. Sometimes you just need to very quickly cast an Ice Nova, Counterspell or a Polymorph. And lastly, remember to protect yourself from magic damage with Dampen Magic and wards, and always remember to make a mana gem. So let's run through the optimal talent build. We'll go through all of the key talents in every single tier and talk about the options that you can take depending on your preferences. In the first tier, I'd recommend just getting improved Frostbolt. You can go for Elemental Precision if you want, but I'm guessing that most people when they jump into TBC are going to have a lot of hit rating and probably won't need this because you're not exactly taking down bosses. However, if you're going to a higher level zone earlier, then you may need that talent. In tier 2, you want to maximise Ice Shards, improve Frost Nova, and either Permafrost or Frostbite. So if you're going for a single target build, Frostbite is going to be better for you because it just increases the chance of you gaining more distance when you're doing single target damage. Doing a single target playstyle might actually be the best option on the launch of TBC because there'll be so much competition for all the AoE pulls that you can do in TBC. But if you're hellbent focused on doing AoE, then you want to swap that talent with permafrost. The reason why we don't go for frostbite is because it will split up the mobs when you do your blizzard pulls. So some of them will get frozen and then fall behind and then not take damage, and then they'll just end up smacking you in the face when you're, you know, got 0 mana. From here you definitely want to maximise Shatter, one of the core talents for a Frost Mage, and then you also want Improved Blizzard if you're going for the AoE build. Then you get Arctic Reach, Cold Snap, maximise Cone of Cold, and then you actually want to maximise Winter's Chill because it is moderately useful for Blizzard, Ice Barrier, max out Improved and Power Frostbolt, and then get your Water Elemental. Now if you want to obviously not do AoE and you want to focus on single target, then you swap these AoE talents for better single target talents. So let me show you what they look like. Just before we jump into that though, you may also want to opt for Icy Flows, slightly better utility because it reduces the cooldown of Cone of Cold, Cold Snap, Ice Barrier and Ice Block, which is very useful, to which case you will take 2 points out of Winter's Chill. And if you don't like the RNG element of Winter's Chill and you feel like you've got enough crit rating anyway, you can take the points out of there and put it into Piercing Ice instead. It's really up to you. So first key talent is Frostbite, then obviously Icy Veins because that's really good. Then you can move on to Piercing Ice, max that out, Arctic Reach, then obviously maxing out Shatter like we did before, Cold Snap, Icy Flows. Then from here, again, it depends on what your hit rating is like. If you're struggling to hit enemies, you probably want to get a few points at Elemental Precision. Obviously jump into Ice Barrier, you can have a max out Elemental Precision or get a little bit of extra, you know, effect on your slow effects from Permafrost, and then you move on to Empowered Frostbolt and then finish it off. Then we're going to finish off in the Arcane Tree. This is the same talent build for whether you're going single or AoE damage. You max out Arcane Subtlety for a little bit extra damage and then a little bit extra hit rating on your Polymorph and Arcane abilities like that from a talent Arcane Focus, but the main reason why we're here is for Arcane Concentration, which is the clear casting effect, and this is what you respec into at level 60. The reason why we get Arcane Concentration is because we can totally reduce the mana cost of Blizzard, which is obviously very useful with an advanced tactic called Clear Casting Fishing, which we'll talk about a little bit later. When you're leveling level 60 to 70, what I'd recommend to do, first of all if you're in a single target build, is to actually, you may as well pick up the AoE talents because you're going to need them in dungeons later on, and there may be opportunities for you to actually do some AoE. So from here, you know, you can finish out Permafrost, finish out Improved Blizzard. And let me cover some more key talents that people like to get. A lot of people like to get Arcane Fortitude, which increases your armor by the same amount as your intellect. It's kind of useful, but it's not that great in all honesty because a lot of the time you just won't actually be hit, but you know, it's really up to you. From here you can also get Frost Channeling, slightly improved mana efficiency, and a lot of people also like just to finish out in Arctic Winds until they get to, you know, level 70, because you may as well, because it's slightly increased damage. So now let's cover both the optimal AoE and single target playstyle for the Mage. There are 3 phases to perfecting an AoE rotation. First of all, gathering the mobs, then clumping the mobs, and then using the Lizard to kill those mobs. So before you do any kind of mob gathering, what you want to do is use Ice Barrier to protect you. Then you mount up and try and body pull as many mobs as you can to a maximum of 10, since that is the AoE cap. You can also use a lower rank Fire Blast if you want to ping pull, or even your wand to get some few extra mobs here and there. Sometimes you can just stand stationary at like 2 camps and then just throw like 2 low rank fireballs and a couple of different mobs if you know close enough, and then you'll end up pulling like loads of mobs to you. Sometimes you do get into those easiest situations, so do definitely take advantage of it. You can also use Blink to get a few extra mobs, and you can also use your Water Elemental. Then in phase 2 you have to clump all of these mobs together into a funnel so that they can gather up into the entire range of one of your Ice Novas. By the way, you should be using rank 1 Ice Nova to save a little bit of mana. Then you want to strafe and face the mobs, otherwise you will get dismounted too early. You can also use Ice Block to make this much easier, but obviously you can only do that every few minutes. Then you Ice Nova and proceed to phase 3. The Blizzard phase. You may also need to Cold Snap the Ice Nova quickly if the Ice Nova is resisted, otherwise it will totally mess up the pull. So you get them all gathered up into a single Ice Nova, and then we can move on to the next phase and start getting on with some Blizzard. So you cast Blizzard with the green circle half in the group and half on the path to your location. You want to make sure that mobs aren't falling behind, our mobs aren't getting too far ahead. Then what you do is you cancel Blizzard if you have to, if the mobs are getting too close, and then you strafe for a couple of seconds and keep repeating this process until the mobs are dead. But you only risk strafing for about 2 seconds, no longer, because you do not want the Blizzard chill effect to ever come off one of the mobs, otherwise they will basically detach from the other group of mobs that will just totally mess everything up. You can also use Arcane Blast as a finisher, and if any of the mobs escape the Blizzard, you can use your Water Elemental's Freeze, or go back into the pack quickly for a new Ice Nova. And if the mobs don't die in this process, which is very unlikely if you have Classic WoW raid gear on, you will have to proceed to an extra phase called the Circle Stalling phase. So first begin strafing in a circle and use a low rank Cone of Cold on your enemies, and wait for Ice Nova to come off cooldown and then use it. And then what you're trying to do while in this, during this process, is using a rank 1 Arcane Blast for clear casting procs, and then the second that you get that clear casting proc, then you can move on to using a higher rank Blizzard or a higher rank Arcane Blast just to finish the mobs off, depending on how much, health they have left. During this time you can also use a bandage, evocation, or your mana gem to try and survive. Those mobs will permanently stay in a slow if you use a low rank Cone of Cold and have it talented, so it's Bob's your uncle. But you probably won't ever get into this phase, to be honest, if you're just dealing with normal mobs if you're in raid gear, unless you're farming elite enemies. You can also use Flame Strike if you want to, but it will take some practice and it can be very risky. You want to use it when all the mobs are in an Ice Nova, otherwise the mobs will just run out of the area of effect and they'll be totally wasted. We will talk more about Flame Strike rank cycling later in a Mage raiding guide. When it comes to dealing single target damage, it's honestly very simple, because people will have so much spell power from raid gear, you probably will only have to ever use Frostbolt and a little bit of strafing to kill the mobs. If a mob does get close because you don't have raid gear on or anything like that, then all you do is simply use a rank 1 Ice Nova, move away for a little bit, and then rinse and repeat doing Frostbolt. It's very, very simple. Sometimes even if you want to, you can just finish the mob off with a lower rank or a medium rank Fire Blast. And then you can also use your wand. When it comes to the Mage armor choice, each armor has its own benefits really. Ice armor provides you with a little bit of extra protection when you're body pulling, because if a mob does hit you, it will be slowed. Molten armor, unlocked at level 62, will give you a little bit of extra cheeky crit rating, which is useful. And Mage armor will increase your mana generation, which can be useful if you need it, especially if you just need a tiny little bit more mana during your AoE cycle. So in a Burning Crusade, all the gear pieces are a lot more standardised, so it makes gearing while levelling up a much more simple process, because you only have to really focus on the secondary stats. The start priority is spell power, spell hit, then spell crit. I would recommend holding on to your spell hit gear, even if you have gear from all the way back from Classic WoW, because you will need a hefty amount of hit chance for raiding. And if you have low hit chance while leveling, it's going to just totally mess up your Ice Novas and ruin your AoE cycle. So let's run through some of the Classic WoW trinkets, set bonuses and items that I would recommend keeping. They're going to be very useful in the leveling process and during raiding during the whole of the Burning Crusade, so they're definitely worth holding on to. I recommend keeping a collection of them in your bags and then swapping them, in and out between pulls while you're waiting for your cooldowns. So, first of all, you have Nefarian's Tear, which is a very powerful item to hold on to. You've got the Mind Quickening Gem, which goes very well with Icy Veins. You've got Talisman of Epithermal Power, the Vanquished Tentacular Cthulhu, which can act like as a little mini tank. You've got Mark of a Champion, which is useful spell power increase against undead and demon enemies, to which there is an abundance of them in the Burning Crusade. You've also got the Restrained Essence of Sapphiron, if you're ever lucky enough to obtain it. And then when it comes to set bonuses, I can see the 5-piece Neverwing set coming very, very useful because of the buff to Blizzard. Then you also got the 6-piece bonus from Frostfire gear, which is also pretty nice. Unfortunately, a lot of the set bonuses are largely threat based, which is something you don't really have to worry about. You only have to worry about them in raiding, so I would definitely recommend keeping all of your raid gear for TBC raiding, because it will be very useful. And lastly, let's talk about the reputation priority for a mage, so that you can devise which dungeons and questing hubs to do while leveling. Your biggest priority, in my opinion, is to get Thralmar or your Honor Hold rep as high as possible for the spell power weapon reward, which will last you a very, very long time, so you definitely want to get that as soon as possible. Although you may want to come back to Hellfire later on after the, Zerg of the launch. The next priority should be Shatar Rep to Revered for the Spell Power Trinket, which is very useful, especially if you didn't get lucky enough to get one during Classic WoW. This means that you have to do a lot of quests in Neverstorm, which is a good hub to do. And then after that you've got the Cenarian Circle. Recommend getting a little bit of rep with them, because you will eventually be farming the absolute hell out of those dungeons to get that up to Exalted, to get the spell hit rating ring, which is best in slot for a very long time. And apart from that you've got a Scribe rep, which means you have to basically hold on to all the rep items, but this is best left to when you're level 70 if you want a hardcore rep grind, because you will just basically have to farm loads and loads of mobs over and over again and do Shadow Labyrinth over and over again. So, but anyway guys, that is the end of the video there. My name is Metagoblin. To my next video, ciao.